The excitement of a new lead is often followed by the grueling reality of the search. Nancy Drew has the motive and she has her father's blessings. But in the world of private investigation, information doesn't always lead to answers. Sometimes it only leads to more questions. Welcome back. Today we open Chapter 8, A Discouraging Day. In this episode, the momentum of the Crowley case grinds to a halt. Nancy spent her hours tracking down the relatives who filed a claim to the Crowley's estate, only to find that memory is a fragile thing and secrets are buried deeper than she imagined. It's a day of slamming doors, vague answers, and the growing fear that the top firms might actually win. But as Nancy is about to learn, a discouraging day isn't a failure. It's a test of persistence. Because often it's when a detective is at their lowest that the most mysterious messages tend to arrive. The trail is cold, but the hunt isn't over. Let's begin Chapter 8. A discouraging day. After leaving her father's office, Nancy Drew went directly home. Quickly backing her roadster from the garage, she set off down the river road in the direction of the old farmhouse where the Horner girls lived. Before leaving the main highway, Nancy glanced anxiously at the sky and was relieved that no clouds were visible. After my last experience, I don't intend to get caught in another storm, she admonished herself. The recent rain had made the roads rough, and Nancy bumped about in the roadster rather uncomfortably. At last, however, she came within the sight of the farmhouse, and as she viewed it from a distance, noticed that it was even older and more run down than she had thought. The house was large and rambling, but apparently it had not been painted in years. Shingles were falling from the roof, and the porches sagged. As Nancy's eyes traveled to the old barn, she wondered how it had managed to survive the recent storm. If Allie and Grace Horner only had money, they could make the place attractive, she thought as she drove through the open gate. Squawking chickens fled before her as she stopped the roadster in the barnyard and switched off the engine. Springing lightly from the car, she ran up the walk towards the house. She paused at the kitchen door and rapped. Receiving no response, she went around to the front of the house and knocked on another door. There was no answer, nor did a tour of the yard reveal either of the Horner girls. Disappointment took possession of Nancy. She had driven nearly 15 miles only to find no one at home. I am defeated at every turn, she thought disconsolately as she slowly walked back to the roadster. It's certainly discouraging. Hello there, a voice called. Were you looking for us? The shouted greeting reached Nancy as she prepared to step into the roadster. One foot on the running board, and she turned her head and saw the Horner girls hurrying towards her from the direction of the barn. Allie did not wait for her sister to open the yard gate, but swinging easily over it, ran to meet Nancy. We saw you just as you were leaving the house, she cried enthusiastically. We wouldn't have missed you for anything. We were picking berries in the woods, Grace explained as she hurried up, slightly out of breath. Proudly, she displayed a tin pail, which was filled nearly to the brim with raspberries. But look at our arms, and Allie laughed ruefully as she glanced down at the ugly scratches which had caused by brambles. and sharp thorns. You must come into the house and have a dish of berries, Nancy, Grace urged hospitably. They are good with sugar and cream. If you don't have them too often, Ellie added. I can stop but a minute, Nancy declared as the three entered the house. I came to talk about the will. Oh, then you have good news for us, Ellie asked hopefully. Are we really going to get some of the money? I don't know yet, Nancy was forced to admit. So far, I haven't been able to learn a thing about the missing will. Alice's face fell, but she tried to hide her disappointment. We need the money so badly, she said with an apologetic smile. Grace hasn't had a new dress in 3 years. She makes all of our clothing out of old things we happen to have in the house. If our luck doesn't change soon, I'm afraid we'll be mistaken for rag pickers. We really didn't expect much of Uncle Josiah's money, Gracie broke in quickly, lest Nancy misinterpret her sister's remarks. We weren't related, you know. Well, you can hardly say the Tomphams were, for that matter, Ali declared. They were third or fourth cousins. We can get along without the money, Grace said quietly. We manage very well when I have plenty of work. We are a little discouraged right now because dressmaking has fallen off. It's a slack season. I guess people would rather go to the store and buy a dress ready made. I wouldn't, Nancy declared impulsively. Grace, I'd like you to engage you to make me a dress. Will you do it? I'll pay you well. Tears of joy came into Grace's eyes. Will I? Oh, you don't know how grateful I am for the work. I haven't had anything to do for nearly 3 months. I don't mind poverty so much for myself, but for Ellie. Her voice broke. I promised Mother I'd looked after her. Alice sprang from her chair, rushed to her sister. She flung her arms affectionately about her. Oh, Grace, I shouldn't have said what I did about needing money. I didn't mean it, truly I didn't, but it's the truth. We'll get along, Grace, if only my chicken money came in faster. Why can't a hen lay more than one egg a day? Grace smiled faintly at Alice's feeble attempt at a joke, and to break an awkward silence, Nancy took up the conversation. I'll bring the dress material with me the next time I come this way. She did not need a new dress, but she realized that there were no other way to help the Horner girls, for they were too proud to accept money. And now I want to ask you a few more questions about Josiah Crowley, Nancy told them. Do you know whether he ever visited other relatives besides the Tophams? Oh, yes, Ali returned promptly. He was only distantly related to the Tophams. You know, there were third cousins, I believe. He had a number of other relatives whom he frequently visited. Before he went to live with the Tophams, they took turns keeping him, Grace informed her visitor. Can you tell me the names of these relatives? Let me see. Grace lost herself in thought. There were two cousins living in Masonville, Matilda and Edna Turner. Ellie prompted her. They are regular old maids, but awfully nice. They were wonderful to Uncle Josiah when he was alive. And there were two nephews, Grace went on, William and Fred Matthews. They have a farm on the same river road. Everyone thought they would get something. How far do they live from here? Nancy inquired. Oh, not more than 5 miles. You can drive there in a few minutes. It's on the way to Masonville. Then I'll be able to make the two calls on the same trip, Nancy announced. as she arose to depart. I must hurry along now, or it will be too late for me to stop there this afternoon. I am hoping that by talking with the relatives, I may learn something which will help us to trace the missing will. I'm afraid there's not much chance we'll ever get anything, Grace said, rather morosely. The Tophams will never let the money slip out of their hands. If we find the will, they won't be able to keep the money, Nancy declared. Father will see to it that you girls get your just due. Oh, Grace, we forgot to tell Nancy about Abigail Rowen. Ally reminded her sister. She'd be apt to know more about the will than anyone else. That's right. You really should call on her, Nancy. She took care of Uncle Josiah one time when he was sick, and he thought the world of her. He often declared he intended to leave her something. Even a few $100 would have meant so much to her, Alice said. Abigail is old and feeble now. She must be more than 70 years of age, and there's no one to look after her. Where shall I find her? Nancy asked quickly. She lives on the Westlake Road, Grace responded. It's a good many miles from here. You could make inquiry at some of the farmhouses along the road. I won't have time to go there today, but I'll surely call upon her as soon as I can. And now I must be going. Oh, it'll be dark long before I get back to River Heights. Nancy said goodbye hastily, and the Horner girls accompanied her to the roadster and watched her drive away. As she looked back from the corner, they waved their handkerchiefs. Plucky girls, Nancy thought. Until today, I didn't realize how terribly they need help. I simply must find a way to help them. She drove along the river road, heading in the direction of Masonville. Although it was growing late, Nancy was determined to visit the Matthew brothers and, if possible, Matilda and Edna Turner. After she had gone perhaps 5 miles, she began to watch the mailboxes and presently noticed one which bore the name Matthews. The farmhouse was set back a short distance from the road, and Nancy drove the roadster from a narrow lane which led to it. As she stopped the car, a man came out of the house and regarded her questioningly. Learning that the farmer was William Matthews, Nancy quickly explained her mission. At first, the man was inclined to distrust her, but after he had made certain that she was not a friend of the Richard Topham family, he talked frankly of Josiah Crowley and told all that he knew concerning the will. My brother and I have filed a complaint with the proper authorities at the courthouse, he explained. We feel certain there must have been another will, because Uncle Joshua always said that he intended to leave us something. Did you actually see the will? Nancy questioned hopefully. The farmer shook his head. No, my brother and I haven't the proof that he ever made a second will, but we do know that he never had any particular love for the Tophams. He felt that they took him in only because they were after his money, and I guess he wasn't wrong at that. Anyway, I'm certain he had made up his mind to cut them off without a cent. Perhaps he neglected to write the second will. That wouldn't be like Uncle Josiah. He was rather queer about little things, but he was always particular in attending to business matters. No, I am more apt to think he made the second will and hid it somewhere. You have no idea where he could have concealed it. Not the slightest, miss. My brother and I will be glad to offer a substantial reward to anyone who can produce it. Nancy asked a number of other questions, but the farmer was unable to furnish information which was of any value. Disappointed, she thanked the man for his trouble and continued her way to Masonville. Rumor, rumor, she sighed. That's all I hear. At my next stop, I hope I'll acquire a few facts. Upon reaching Masonville, Nancy made inquiry and was directed to the home of the Turner sisters. They lived alone at the outskirts of the city. Although not in poverty, they did not have any more money than they needed. Nancy found them at home. When they learned the purpose of her visit, they greeted her cordially. They were very pleasant ladies, and she spent nearly an hour at their home. But although they answered her questions willingly, she learned nothing which had a direct bearing on the missing will. Matilda and Edna Turner insisted Josiah Crowley had intended to disinherit the Tophams, but they had no idea what could have become of the later will. They had been led to expect a small inheritance and were disappointed that everything was to go to the Tophams. "Why don't you talk with Abigail Rowen?" Matilda suggested at the conclusion of the interview. "She took care of Josiah once when he was very sick, and he thought a lot of her. She knew more about his queer ways than any other living person." "I don't believe it would do a particular good," Edna interposed. "Abigail is getting along in years, and her memory isn't what it used to be." It was after dark when at last Nancy took leave of the Turner sisters and headed her roadster towards home. She was tired and hungry and as well as discouraged. "So far I have only wasted my time," she thought despondently. "I'm no closer to find the will than I ever was, and I'm sure there is one. I have often heard father say that no real mystery is solved without a lot of hard work, and I'm ready to believe it." With the exception of Abigail Rowen, Nancy had called upon all of the Crowley relatives. From what the Turner sisters had told her, she was doubtful that a visit to her cottage would be worthwhile. "Oh, well, I suppose I may as well go there tomorrow," Nancy decided after a mental debate. "She's my last hope. If I fail there, I'll be forced to give up." Sun sets on a day of closed doors and almost. Nancy began this morning with a list of names and a heart full of hope. But the road between River Heights and the home of the Matthew brothers and the Turner sisters has been long and paved with the same heartbreaking story. What makes this a discouraging day isn't just the lack of will. It's the weight of the collective disappointment Nancy encountered throughout the chapter. To hear from relative after relative that Josiah Crowley promised to take care each of them, only to see the Tophams living his shadow, is a heavy burden for a young sleuth to carry. But in the world of mystery, even a dead end leaves a signpost. The name Abigail Rowen has emerged, a woman who saw Josiah at his most vulnerable. Nancy is learning that the truth often hides with those who have nothing left to gain but everything to tell. Nancy has visited the cousins and the neighbors, but Abigail Rowen is a different kind of witness. Do you think a 70-year-old caretaker is a more reliable source than the family members we have met so far? Or is Abigail just another name on a list of broken promises? I want to hear your theories on why Josiah might have trusted a nurse over his kin. If you ever had a day where the answers felt just out of reach, Hit the like button to show Nancy some support. The trail is exhausting, but it isn't cold yet. Join me next time for Chapter 9. We are heading to see Abigail Rowen, and the secrets of the Crowley estate are finally starting to speak. See you in the next archive. Bye bye.